What is the most horrible thing you've seen a child do say that just made your blood boil? I worked at a grocery store during high school as a cashier. One typical busy Sunday, I was ringing out an older lady who was buying among her normal groceries a birthday cake for her husband. They had recently celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary and it was his 79th birthday. She had a large sheet cake with a typical happy birthday greeting and a photo of him at his first birthday after getting back from Europe in World War II. She left it in her cart until I had rang everything else out so not to damage it. A child was with his family in line behind her. The lady begins to lift the cake out and the child screams, "Oh cake, I want some." The lady politely says, "You do? This is for my husband. Do you think he will like it?" The child shrieks, "Yay, I do and I want some." The lady giggles and says, "No hun, I would like to. I have a lot of people waiting for it. Maybe your mummy and daddy will buy you one." The kid, obviously not used to being told no, throws a fit and does a Hulk smash down through the plastic into the cake and giggles and he licks his hands. The lady is speechless. Meanwhile, butthole child's parents are laughing and saying the usual, "Oh, you are so funny." The kid is still giggling and saying how fun it was. I chime in and ask them what their problem was. Thinking it is okay for their kid to do that, they just say, "He is 8, what can I do?" I said, "Punish him. Learn how to raise your child." Should I go on? I close my line down and leave them standing there while I go back to the bakery to fix her cake. After about 20 minutes of cake surgery by our bakery ladies, reprinting a new edible image and new piping, the cake was good as new. Parents complained, but after I told my manager, she took my side and all was well. TLDR. Butthole child Hulk smashes an elderly woman's cake for her husband. Child and parents not remorseful. At my job in high school, these parents let their child run around like a maniac in the store while they did their shopping. At one point the kid, who was old enough to know better, picked up a large bottle of cologne and chucked it hard at a toddler-aged kid. The toddler obviously started crying. Of course I found the boy's parents and told them. They showed very little remorse, didn't even bother apologizing to the other parents, and most shocking of all, did not scold their son at all. No wonder why that kid thinks it's okay to behave that way. It was the parents who ended up sickening me more though. This reminds me of when my brother-in-law taught my 2-year-old nephew how to play catch, which just turned into him throwing anything and everything at everyone. It was a rough couple of years. There was a group little kids from down the street. Every day would torment my dog by throwing rocks etc at him and screaming, running up and down the fence. One day, after living there for years and them being a few years older and more bold now, decided it would be a good idea to stick his face against the fence and taunt my dog. Needless to say, my dog lost his crap and bit the kid once. Was about a 1/4 below taking his eye out. He ran home crying. Cut to 30 minutes later with cops and his dickhead father at my house demanding I destroy my dog. Had to put him up for adoption. Family told me a friend on a farm had room for him. Don't know if that was really true or if it was a BS kid's story. To this day, I hate that little crap and think he got only what he deserved. This makes me so unbelievably mad. Growing up, I was taught you respect animals or they can and will frick your crap up, and it will be your fault the dog was on your property. He was defending his home. Little sucker deserved worse than he got. A friend of mine lost her husband. It was the day of his funeral and we were in the car behind the hearse. 2 kids, age 10-12, on bikes start riding alongside our car, look in the windows and start chanting "Someone died haha, someone died haha." I have never felt the urge to inflict pain on someone so much. You should have swerved into them. My friends and I were standing in the lunch queue at school. One of my friend's parents died and that day was his first day back at school after weeks of absence. Most of the class was aware of what happened. This kid standing behind us noticed him and for no reason said, "Haha, your parents died." We then applied punches to his face. Please tell me the teacher said nothing happened or at least it was self-defense. One time I was eating with my parents and their friends, and their 2 or 3-year-old kid just jumps out of his seat and starts running around the restaurant. 10 minutes later, our waitress brings the kid to the table, saying he almost burned himself on the stove, and the parents just said "Oh, thanks" and continued their conversation, and let the kid run around again. A child will only burn themselves on the stove once, especially a commercial restaurant stove. Every Christmas I head up to Boston to visit a friend while he's home from college, and his family always hosts a massive New Year's party. There's this one family who brings this young child of theirs, I want to say maybe 10ish years old. Part of the party is spent playing Mario Party and Super Smash Bros on the Gamma Cube in the basement. This most recent New Year's my friend and I and a few others were playing Mario Party in the basement and this kid comes down and screams I wanna play Super Smash Bros and I said sure. After this game and he yelled no, I wanna play now. We said tough luck and turned our heads back to our game. The kid proceeded to grab a pool cue and start screaming and whacking my friend's face. He ended up with a black eye and multiple bruises. After I wrestled the pool cue away from him, his drunk parents came down and after we explained the situation to them, they scolded me for being rough with their kid, and their kid got off scot-free because he didn't know any better. I don't care how old your child is. If he doesn't know any better, you're a bad parent. I want to round up the parents of every single kid in this thread into one big room and explain to them calmly that their children are not special, they are not the son of the earth, and that they need to learn that the world does not revolve around them. Then I'd punch them all in the face, one by one. I was swimming with my 3-year-old son at the public pool. We were in the shallow end by the steps and he was tiptoeing along to keep his head above water when a wild ball appears. My son reached an arm out to touch it, still bouncing on the tippy of toes when a snaggle-toothed, weird-shaped head 9-year-old pushed him down and under. I reached in and grabbed my son by the back of the neck as I was certain he would be swallowing water. I took a quick look around for a watching parent. There was none. I proceeded to sweep the kid's feet out from under him just as he was laughing about the ball hitting him in the head. Success kid JPG. Pool story, bro. My mom works at a barn just across from our house. It goes house, pasture full of horses, neighbor's house, then barn. So one day, I simply look outside at the beautiful creatures only to find the neighbor's kids literally leaned over the gates and slapping the horses across the face. Knowing my mom adores their horses, I went to her and said, "Mom, little girls are slapping their horses." To which her response was this, "No they're not, witness crime, oh my god," and then yelling, "Stop slapping my freaking horses." They didn't do it ever again. My mom's a badass over here. I like your mom. I saw some kids, probably around 10 or 12 years old, laughing it up in an alleyway I was walking down on my way back home one day. As I drew closer, the kids noticed me and scrammed. I came to the place where the kids had been playing and there was a kitten, twitching in its death throes. The kids had been throwing rocks at it. Lost my hope for the future and humanity, right there. I'm fairly sure this is how serial killers are created. I was at the library when a family came in, teenage brother with several little sisters. The mother was obviously frazzled and stressed. The brother whined and complained the whole time they were there, a real shithead. When they were lined up to check out their books, one of his sisters stood right in front of the counter. Her mouth was the exact height of the edge. The brother stood right behind her and shoved her hard against the counter. She smacked the crap out of her mouth and started crying. It took everything in me not to beat the crap out of that butthole. This made me fume. I was in grade 6 I believe. I had just lost my mom to a long battle of cancer. I was outside playing when this kid and I start arguing. Something gets said. He replies with, "Yeah, well your mom looked at you and died." At that he knew I was angry. He started to run away as fast as he could. I caught up to him, tackled him down, and then punched him until the teacher came and stopped us. The teacher asked what happened. I told him what he had said. The teacher understood and just wanted us to forget it. We did. Reading what that kid said reminded me of what a bunch of kids at school said to me when I was 7. "You're so ugly that when you were born your mum took one look at you and got rid of you. I am adopted." Reading this thread reminds me that kids can be cruel, but often don't understand the consequences of what they say. I'm currently an au pair looking after 3 children. One day the middle child had a few friends over who were just leaving when I started my shift. I went upstairs and the girl's room was a disaster. Crap just everywhere. I informed the girl that she must help me clean her room, being nice. I didn't even have to help. She threw a huge fit and started crying, and when I asked her to hand me a pile of cards she kicked them and they went all over the room. I told her to pick those up for doing that and she stopped crying and stared at me with an intense fury and replied, "Why should I? Isn't that your job?" with emphasis in tone on the job. She is 7. I wanted to throw her down the stairs right then and there. 7-year-old FWP. My room was a mess and my au pair wouldn't even clean it. I don't know what people expect their kids to turn out like when they have to hire other people to raise their children. There was a teacher at my school who had a car accident. She was in the hospital for about 3 weeks until she died from her injuries. They called all of her students to the auditorium to inform them of her passing. Immediately after the announcement, some little crap stood up, didn't even wait to be called on, and indignantly asked how this would affect her grade. This'll be buried, but what the heck? It's a fond memory. Over the past couple of years, I've spent a lot of time on the Washington State ferry system going from Anacortes to San Juan Island. Depending on the route, it can be anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours in an enclosed space. When it's cold out, screw being above decks, with several other people. The particular ferry we were on that day was a 2-hour ride, and the then boyfriend and me went up to the loungeway general area to take team nap, because we'd decided to walk on instead of drive. This little kid, probably 5 or 6, decided that all 3 of the racing arcade games on that level were his and his alone. He would scream back to his parents for quarters, and they would dutifully walk across the ferry under the weighted glares of every other passenger to feed the little hellion more coins to stuff the machines with. One of the machines expired, by virtue of time, and a timid looking kid, maybe 12, came over and put his own quarters into the machine and sat down to play. The little crap went ballistic, flailing fists and teeth and tears and expletives, and the older kid just shrank away. I was finally about to stand up because, seriously, enough, when out of the corner of my eye I saw this straight-backed, button-up shirt-wearing man in his 80s striding towards the 2 of them. The man reaches the flailing crotch fruit, picks him up by the back of his pants and shirt, walks him over to the table where the parents are dazedly staring off into space, deposits said child firmly, face down, on the table and says calmly and clearly, "Deal with your child before I am tempted to deal with him further," and looked meaningfully to the double doors that led to the edge of the boat. That man is one of my heroes, and I hope to live long enough that it's socially acceptable for me to punish other people's kids. I hope to live long enough that it's socially acceptable for me to punish other people's kids. Dang straight. I used to be pretty heavily involved in volunteering for this after-school violin program in a mostly Hispanic neighboring town. The woman who ran it had a heart of gold and worked really hard to make it a really fun community program with the parents and siblings involved, so she threw a pool party that all the families were invited to every year at my parents' house. One very active student in the program brought his mother and 2 younger brothers. One of the brothers was probably in 1st grade or so and already had a horrible reputation as this awful hellion. He had been expelled from kindergarten for throwing a tantrum and screaming curses at the teacher when she tried to calm him down. I heard it took several adults to drag him out of the room when it happened. Anyway, at the pool party he was acting pretty normally until my friend who had offered to help lifeguard told him to stop splashing. To put this in context, my friend is black, from an inner city upbringing, and came to my very white town to go to high school, so she is understandably a little race conscious. So when this kid tells her "Don't tell me what to do," Enga, God, I can't even write it, she just bursts into tears. We kicked the kid out of the pool and explained to her that he was just a tiny butthole, but she was inconsolable for a long time. She was just trying to be nice and help out at a party. What a horrible child. That's when you hold him under until he stops splashing. That's not your spot. This isn't even your house. You don't belong here. Dad's girlfriend's kids when I was babysitting the little shoots so they didn't have to go to their grandmother's house. It was the house my dad and girlfriend bought together. Wanted to smack them so hard. You should follow them around and fart on everything they love. I was working at a grocery store when I heard a little boy, 5 maybe, ask his mom to buy him one of those crappy little toys that seem to be everywhere. She calmly told him to put it back and he threw an absolute fit. She kept telling him to put the dang thing back and he finally screamed out, if dad was alive maybe you wouldn't be such a freaking bee. There was a brief pause and you could see on the little bastard's face that he knew he fricked up. The woman backhanded this kid right across the face and knocked him into the shelf. Bottles of salad dressing went everywhere. She picked the screaming kid up and took him outside to her car, came back in and helped me clean up the mess, then finished shopping. I wish more parents were as awesome as her. Beast mode engaged. This is probably going to seem minor in comparison to all the other comments I've read here, but here's my story. When I was in 8th grade, they cancelled the school buses. My neighbor at the time happened to work at the school I went to, so she offered to drive me in. It was pretty cool at first, but her child was a little hellion. One time we were in the car together, and she called me a loser for liking books. I was just blown away that a 5-year-old would try to insult me like that when I'd done nothing but be pleasant to her. Her mom did nothing. She was pretty much a passive-aggressive bee though. She started to drop me off further and further away from the school, drop me off like 2 hours early, or drive past the school to drop her daughter off, which made me late for class. She'd also lock the car door on me, and refused to let me out until I said thank you. My stepsister is 18 years old and hits her mom, screams, slams doors and breaks things when she gets upset. This is a daily occurrence. I recently told her that if she were to ever act that way towards me I would call the police. She told me she would just tell them that I had abused her and that they would believe her because she's a girl. Her mom has allowed the daughter to be in complete control of the household and to act like this ever since the daughter was 7 years old, when her father died unexpectedly. I think we share the same sister. My 17-year-old younger sis acts exactly like this, and so does my mom, for that matter. I once saw a mother and 2 children, a boy and girl both less than 5. The children were bickering playfully when the boy said, "Oh yeah, well dad wanted an abortion." The mother, playing on her phone, didn't say do a thing. I mean, what clearly happened was that the kids heard and quoted part of an argument, but still. So messed up. I wear kilts regularly. A few days ago I decided to walk up to the store while in my kilt. On the way there I had to pass an elementary school that was just getting out. And holy freaking crap. I wanted to smack this one group of 10-year-olds. One of them starts trying to get in my face saying, "Why don't you put on some pants you frickin' gay F," while all the other C in his group were yelling similar things. It took all of my willpower to not pick the little crap up and throw him under a bus. I could imagine a large, hairy kilted man brandishing a small child over his head and caber tossing the sucker under a bus. I was at a Chinese New Year's party, and being the only teenager at the party, mom didn't trust me being alone in the house. I became best friends with the dog. There were also a bunch of little kids at the party, so a little boy wanted to play with the dog. His definition of play was grabbing the dog's fur, gouging its eyes, and yanking its tail. The whole time he was laughing maniacally. Luckily for him, this dog was really shy and didn't kill the little crap. I told the kid to stop, and he didn't, so I had to play keep the kid away from the dog for the rest of the night. I was babysitting my dad's ex-girlfriend's, was a current at the time, niece, and I couldn't get her to behave. She'd call me crude names, was attempting to paint on the carpet of my dad's living room and threw several tantrums. So I stuck her in timeout in what I believed to be a relatively safe corner, next to the kitchen counter. When I turned my back, she stood up and grabbed the cordless phone off the counter, and threw it at me, beaming me in the back. I was so enraged I grabbed her by the shirt and dragged her to a different corner away from anything and everything she could grab, and left her there for 3 hours. Every time she walked out of the corner I dragged her back. Our little girl chucked a phone at me. Repetition of putting her back to where you wanted her to sit was exactly how you are supposed to handle a situation like that. Very well played. My sister is mentally disabled. She has severe scoliosis, and her face is disfigured because of her medication. There have been instances of children in church teasing her and calling her ugly. My neighbor's bastardy little brother needed to tell me she was ugly for some goddamn reason. Freaking hate kids. You make it sound like being in church makes them better people automatically. I was at Target and a woman with 2 small children was pushing a cart. The youngest was maybe a year old and was riding in the seat. The older one was a girl, and couldn't have been more than 4 or 5. The older one was hanging off the side of the cart. The mother, in a very soft motherly voice said, "Honey, could you not do that? It makes it very hard for mommy to push the cart." The child looks up her mother with this total spawn of Satan look and says to her mother, "That's not true. You're just being a bee." The mother just sort of shook her head and kept going. I stopped in my tracks and had to compose myself for a minute. All I wanted to do was go smack that little girl in the mouth. I have a feeling the one you should be smacking is the girl's dad. I had just got off from a crappy day at work and was walking into Walmart to get some groceries. All of a sudden this kid in his mother's arms reaches over and pinches the crap out of me. Normally I would have just kept walking, but the kid was like 6 and his mom was carrying him like a baby, so I knew he knew better. I look down at my arm and there are nail marks that are turning red from where he was still holding on. I told the kid to let go and pushed his arm from me, and his mother started cussing me out in Spanish, telling me not to touch her baby. I hate children. The mother sounds like a bee. I mean, show your kids some discipline, people. I'm slipping this in here for the few people that make it this far down the thread. I'm also going to go opposite with the instructions as well. I was working at a 24-hour drug store in Denver in the mid-90s. There were a lot of Russian emigres that were living together close to the store. Every few days an entire group would do their shopping together. There were about 4 sets of older people and they entered the store, shopped and checked out together. One of the sets brought their granddaughter. This adorable little girl had blonde hair, a beautiful smile and bright blue eyes. If you saw her, you'd think, if a kid ended up looking this cute, having kids wouldn't be so bad. As each couple was rung up, this little girl translated everything. She communicated in English and I assume Russian between the grandparents and the checkers. This included handling the cash. She did this for everyone's shopping until they were all done. I approve of this child. This is only horrible because she was repeating what her parents said. First grader, "I want to be white." Me, "Why? You're perfect just how you are." First grader, "My mom says white people get whatever they want." Me, "Really? I guess that's why your mom is driving a Mercedes and I'm driving a rusted Escort." In the kid's defense, "You never stated you didn't want a rusted Escort." I once witnessed a young boy screaming at his mother that he wanted sweets, and then repeatedly punching her in the breast until she gave in and bought him a cookie. What a brat. I worked at a bank that gave kids lollipops. I handed this boy one and he proceeds to open it. His dad says say thank you, and little C says no and his dad just smiles at me. I don't have any stories, but I will say this. If you have a child who acts like a C in public, and when she does you just laugh it off, you are a terrible parent. I hate when people don't discipline their children. I hate children in general, but crap, don't do that. Really annoys me when kids throw tantrums and break stuff and the parents just ignore it. I used to teach preschool. We had one 4-year-old boy named Clay who looked exactly like Chucky, who had no business whatsoever being around other children. One day he managed to turn on the hose and drenched me so completely that I had to drive home and change. He was notorious for stealing shoes and throwing them into the pool. But the worst thing he did was rip the spinner off of a twister board and stab me in the stomach with it as hard as he could. I hated that little crap. I came into this thread expecting to laugh at stories of spoiled little brats throwing tantrums in supermarkets. Instead, I'm just really sad. I used to work at a fairly large supermarket on the bread and cake section. One day, as I was working away minding my own business, there was a family deciding which birthday cake to buy. The girl picked up a boxed cake, then proceeded to punch it very hard a few times, then put it back. Her mother didn't do a thing about it. The cake was totally wrecked and had to be binned. My cousin was freaking terrible as a kid. His mom had had 4 miscarriages before she had him, so she always treated him like an angel, no matter what he did. One weekend he stayed with my grandparents and they took him to a baseball game even though they didn't have much money. They bought him a bat with the team name on it because he begged for it, and they always tried to spoil us as much as they could. Then he asked for a jersey, too, and they politely said no, they simply couldn't afford it. He then said to my grandpa, "Well, I can just hit you in the head with this bat and take your wallet," with a crap-eating grin on his face. What he didn't remember is that my grandpa was a high school superintendent for nearly 40 years and doesn't take crap from anyone, especially bratty kids. Apparently my grandpa grabbed his arm, put him over his knee and spanked the crap out of him in front of everyone. I think my cousin was 12 or so at the time. They took him back to his parents' house and told my aunt that they'd let him visit again when he was more well-mannered. I laugh every time I think about it. Your grandpa is a freaking boss. My roommate has a large family and one of his young sizes, Sally Ann, who is currently 12 years old, is pure evil. When she was about 2 or 3 years old, she threatened to kill my roommate John, who then responded that she couldn't do that. She said I could if I had a stick with fire at the end of it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.